Welcome to the School Psychology Review webinar focused on theory, methods, and practice to advance equity and social justice in school psychology. And joining us today are Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Arora, Dr. Song, and myself as the editor of School Psychology Review, Shane Jimerson. Now, as we're beginning the webinar, there is a poll posted where each of you can reply briefly to those couple of quick questions. And also, for those of you that are active on social media, we encourage you to take screenshots and share information, put it out there for our colleagues to see, whether that's on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And then also know that we are recording this session such that it can be posted on the School Psychology Review YouTube channel. So again, welcome to our session today. And in looking at who's already on here, who the participants are, based on the poll, 30% of those participants presently are students, 25% are practitioners, and 42% are faculty. There's also a couple that are other, so welcome as well. So welcome to all. And in terms of whether or not you've submitted a paper to School Psych Review previously, we can see that 35% have indeed submitted a paper previously. And so that means 65% have not yet, right? So welcome to all. I'll go ahead and end that poll, so we'll remove that from your screen. And we'll go ahead and proceed with the presentation today. So again, welcome. And we'll begin with a brief introduction from each of our panelists. We'll go ahead and start with Dr. Sullivan.
I'm Amanda Sullivan. I'm a professor and the program director of the school psychology program at the University of Minnesota. And in my professional work spanning my research, teaching, and service, I'm really focused around improving educational outcomes and experiences for students from traditionally minoritized backgrounds. And so this is a topic I'm really excited about.
Excellent, thank you. And Dr. Arora.
Good morning, afternoon, everybody. My name is Prerna Arora. I'm an assistant professor of psychology and education at Teachers College, Columbia University. My research looks at increasing access and quality of culturally informed interventions for youth internalizing disorders, in particular for historically marginalized youth, and with a particular focus on immigrant origin youth in schools and community settings. It's nice to be here.
Great to see you.
Hello,
and Dr. Song.
Sorry, Shane. Hello, everybody. My name's Sam Song. I'm here at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, associate professor of school psychology, program coordinator. And my work is focused on school culture and climate, as is related to healthy development of all children and families. And in particular, I've been looking at restorative justice evaluation work and implementation processes.
Excellent, welcome. And again, my name is Shane Jimerson. I am the editor of School Psychology Review and also a professor at the University of California here in Santa Barbara. And my research broadly focuses on promoting the social, behavioral, emotional, and mental health of all children, with a strong emphasis on doing this work within the school context. So I'm delighted to be here today with our distinguished panel, our group of colleagues who are both leaders in the field, but also leaders with the School Psychology Review Journal. And each of them had identified this topic early on as an important one for us to feature. And they're going to serve as the guest editors for this particular special topic section. So it's important that you're able to hear some of the ideas and information from them here today. And you can also be in touch with them if you need additional information. Okay. As we noted at the beginning, there is a chat open that you're welcome to share ideas, information, insights as we go forward today. And there's also a question and answer that you can also pose questions. In terms of our agenda for today, we'll briefly provide an overview of information related to the context in which this special topic is being focused on and emerging in, the importance of this particular topic, the purpose of this special topic section. We'll briefly touch base on the types of manuscripts that we're encouraging, also note the due date, and as we indicated, there'll be a brief amount of time for questions and answers at the end. All right, so without further ado, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Arora, I believe, to begin with.
Thank you very much. So in 2018, about 50% of the nation's child's population was described as white. Beyond this group, about 25% of children were described as Hispanic or Latinx, Latino, 14% as Black or African American, 5% as Asian, 4% as multiracial, and 1% as American Indian or Native Alaskan. The nation's child's population is thus more diverse than its total population. These numbers, moreover, are expected to further shift, with white children being projected to be in the minority by the year 2030. Next slide, please. Recent events, as I'm sure everybody here is familiar, have increased the national dialogue on issues such as race, racism, and youth. These events include the police killings of Black youth, family separation policies impacting immigrant families, and most recently, increases in anti-Asian victimization related to the COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, psychological research has not kept up with these demographic shifts. For instance, in this first paper here, Hendricks et al. In 2010 reviewed available databases of comparative behavioral science studies. And what they found were that people from Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic societies, which they termed weird societies, represent as much as 80% of study participants, but only 12% of the world's population. More recently, Roberts et al. 2020 queried more than 26,000 empirical articles published between 1974 and 2018 in top-tier cognitive, developmental, and social psychology journals to document how often our psychological science research acknowledges demographic shifts and the reality of our current population. They found that across the past 5 decades, psychological publications that highlighted race have been rare. And although they have increased in some fields, in this particular study, most notably developmental and social psychology, they have remained virtually non-existent in others, such as cognitive psychology. In our field, we see similar trends. Evaluations of diversity-related literature within school psychology has found that historically, for instance, in 1975 to 1990, only 9% of articles had a, quote, minority-related focus. Follow-up studies after this, which also considered different types of areas of diversity, including socioeconomic diversity and sexual orientation-focused literature, found that despite increases in focus on diversity-related literature, numbers have remained low overall, with particular gaps in research related to Latinx, sexual minority, and linguistically diverse youth. Moreover, a content analysis of publications within school psychology and related fields from 2008 to 2010 found that, as compared to special education and professional school counseling, US-based school psychology journals dedicated the least focus to diversity-related topics, again underscoring the limited focus on this important topic within our field. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
So with this context in mind, including the field-wide commitment to anti-racism, we recognize a need to broaden and deepen the scholarship within school psychology to support advancement of social justice and equity. In doing so, we really hope within this special topic to leverage diverse perspectives that might not have been represented in school psych journals in the past. We would really like to see, again, that epistemic diversity that has not necessarily been represented in a lot of the literature within our field. We encourage inter and transdisciplinary approaches in the scholarship submitted, really with the goal of curating innovative forward thinking that really is deeply contextualized in our current context. So next slide. So, as I said, our overarching goal is really to curate this special topic to push forward consideration of how we, as school psychology scholars, trainers, practitioners, can expand and enhance the way we contextualize, design, implement, and interpret school psychology research. Next slide.
So some of the big ideas that we wanted to share with you are these. So the first one is the dignity and rights of all people. So we view ethics and as really intertwined and foundational for a lot of this work. And so one idea would be, how do ethics and being just and fair to all populations, but especially historically marginalized populations, factor into our thinking about some of this work? Another big idea is just looking at the conceptualization. So the expansion of how we think about, design, implement, interpret school psychology research. So interpretation is pretty important in terms of the data, but what they mean is very important for our field. Lastly, how do we approach graduate preparation and practice to advance equity in psychoeducational services for learners from historically marginalized backgrounds? And so these are the some examples of more focused areas, but big ideas to consider. Next slide, please. And so moving along in terms of specificity then, as you heard, Dr. Sullivan mentioned already, but novel reconceptualizations of school psychology, right? So not so much the traditional, but what will advance us forward by thinking differently and by doing differently. Some examples of this work in terms of frameworks would be intersectionality, social justice, anti-racism, and decolonization work. Looking at power, privilege, and ethics, and how they inform interpretation and methodology. Interdisciplinary and global perspectives, again, Dr. Sullivan mentioned that, but just, that's something that's really important. We need to acknowledge that school psychology's literature base is extremely limited, especially in this area of looking at individuals from minoritized backgrounds and communities. And so it behooves us to look elsewhere, okay, and learn from others in a collaborative way. Historically marginalized communities, again, just to highlight that, and then diversification of school psychology and broadly construed, right? So recruitment, retention, graduation, the pipeline issues, right? How to train in novel ways and in ways that have not been done before, or reconsiderizations of that. So next slide, please.
So in seeking to curate that broad set of manuscripts to advance social justice and school psychology practice, research, and graduate education, we welcome wide-ranging types of manuscripts. And some of these things might represent work that hasn't typically been seen in SPR or some of the other school psych journals, but we really do encourage authors to consider SPR a home for theoretical, conceptual, and methodological papers that they might be preparing that are related to this topic, as well as empirical investigations leveraging any type of design or methods. We also welcome systematic reviews and database opinion papers addressing issues within the purview of this special topic, as well as briefer commentaries or analytic essays. We also want to note that each submission will go through a double-blind peer review process. And Shane, I didn't know if you wanted to add more on that.
Yes, I can highlight that we use a triple-blind peer review process ultimately in the sense that reviewers don't know who the authors don't know who the action editors are, action editors don't know who the authors are. And so we try to utilize that infrastructure to maximize the reducing implicit bias or other potential concerns that might arise from that. But as Dr. Sullivan mentioned, we're looking forward to papers that cut across the various areas as articulated by Dr. Sullivan and really make a contribution to this important topic. Yeah. And in terms of the due date, I want to acknowledge that initially we had anticipated papers coming in even sooner, but given all that's been going on in the world, recognizing with the COVID context, the systemic racism and anti-racism efforts that have been initiated and become further understood by many, that we extended this due date such that we've extended it to March the 20th here in 2021. And so we're hoping that many of you will be in a position to prepare your articles to submit by that March 20th due date. But we also want to acknowledge that this is a topic we're committed to far beyond the scope of just this special topics section. So the reality of it is that if you have a paper that you see as very much offering a contribution to this, to the topics outlined in this special topics section, that certainly if you have that paper in a month later or 2 months later or 6 months later, although it might not be able to be slotted into the special topics section, we want to reiterate that we're committed to continuing an ongoing focus on these topics over time. So for those of you hoping to get your paper considered for the special topics section to be featured within that collection of articles, please do submit by March 20th. But if it comes in after that, we're also able to accommodate review and consideration of these papers throughout. And you'll be submitting on using the Taylor and Francis online portal. So many of you recognize that School Psych Review beginning in 2020 through the partnership of NASP and Taylor and Francis is now featured within the Taylor and Francis Routledge portal. And so when you click on that link, you'll see an interface that looks like this, with featuring the Taylor and Francis information and the NASP information. And you just click on this green dot here, and it will allow you to submit your article for consideration. All right, so hopefully that's straightforward. And let's see, I think we're to the point where we can field questions. I know this is a topic where lots of colleagues might have particular questions and/or ideas of areas to further emphasize. The one question that I did notice came up in the Q&A is whether or not we are offering CEUs for this webinar. And presently we are not. We certainly are looking into the possibility in the future of offering CEUs. But for now, it's for the knowledge and for the wisdom. And we appreciate your participation. Certainly, we hope that this is valuable for many of you, but we are not presently offering the CEUs for these SPR Zoom webinars. Now, with that said, I know there's lots of colleagues on here with vast expertise as related to this area. And you'll notice on the School Psych Review social media, we have put out announcements asking colleagues to identify particular areas that they believe will further advance and extend our knowledge as related to the theory, the methods, and practice to advance equity and social justice in school psychology. So perhaps some folks would like to share some other additional insights and/or questions for the panelists about any related topics. Let's see. Not seeing anything in there just yet. Oh, excellent. So we see one of the comments related that was posted here. Many of you can also see it, but for those who can't, it says practically all states have anti-bullying laws. And so any suggestions about the overlap with the social justice and equity, perhaps Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Song, Dr. Arora, do you have any sort of reflections as related to the anti-bullying laws that are in most states and the potential overlap with social justice and equity? Let's see if
Also, I would say that we know bullying affects students of all different dimensions of difference. And in a lot of ways, when we think about the case law and different elements related to like equal protection and whatnot, anti-bullying can be fraught when we think about how it affects some of the most marginalized groups and how things are enacted differently, and particularly how educators' responses to bullying can be moderated by their orientation to difference and different issues related to equity or social justice. And so we would certainly welcome any kind of scholarship that explores those intersections Again, I think there's some fairly complicated and complex intersections around those state laws, the treatment of different minoritized groups within schools, and how educators, administrators, students perceive those differences and then act accordingly.
Indeed. I don't know if Dr. Song or Dr. Arora have any additional reflections they wanted to add there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. I would agree. I think maybe there's a potential for looking at these laws and how they impact, how they're linked to intervention work or practices in that state or across states. I'm not sure if you're looking at different data, what data you have, but that could be something interesting in looking at kind of what Dr. Sullivan mentioned about if there are certain groups who are, I guess, not considered in terms or equally or equitably based on the law, because each of the laws, depending on how the terms are defined, from what I understand, can really lead to different actions. So I think that could be something interesting as well. Yeah, that would be my additional.
Excellent. One other observation I have that sort of extends this question that is being asked is that in the previous special topic section that was developed during this past year, focusing on school violence and school safety, I will note that there are several forthcoming articles that will be featured in School Psych Review that specifically focus on this topic of bullying and victimization as related to minoritized youth, and that could intersect with some of the types of information that is relevant to this particular question. And I see that John is also asking, I'm wondering if schools with long-standing PBIS have lower rates of suspensions or ODRs for minority students, for example. So that would be a great type of scholarship to feature within this type of a special topic section, I believe. Again, I don't know if any of the other guest editors, panelists have additional perspective.
I mean, that topic that John is wondering about, I think, is another complicated one where the literature has really fallen on both sides. And so we would certainly welcome research or conceptual papers that explore that issue directly, since I think it's salient to so many of folks working in schools, especially right now, concerned about how do we actually provide more supportive school environments. And to the extent that PBIS does or doesn't accomplish that, we would certainly love to create a space in SPR to explore that.
Absolutely. I think to that, in reference to the question that was just posted on our, I'm not sure if everybody sees the Q&A questions, but a comment about the focus here or our willingness to be open to qualitative and mixed methods focused studies. I think what we're really hoping for here, as Dr. Song and Sullivan mentioned throughout the presentation previously, is really looking at maybe new ways of answering some questions that have been asked before, thinking slightly differently about ways in which we can approach these topics within the field of school psychology. So using qualitative methodologies, participatory approaches, asking questions in different ways with a different theoretical lens that maybe hasn't been as prominent in our field, are all types of things that we're really eager to see and review with this special topic.
Excellent, thank you. Absolutely. And I noticed another question that has posted in our question and answers has to do with approximately how soon do we get a decision? And I'm delighted to share that we have a leadership team of action editors and editorial board members, as well as student editorial board members, who are committed to completing timely, high quality, and constructive reviews. And by timely, I want to share that reflects our commitment to providing a decision within 30 days from submission. So across the board, as we look at many other journals, that's quite significantly reduced turnaround time. but also featuring the high quality element of having constructive and thoughtful content included. So generally speaking, for any manuscript submitted to school psychology review, we do have a commitment to providing that decision and feedback within 30 days. Now, granted, there are extenuating circumstances in some instances, given the high volume of submissions, both for special topic sections as well as general article considerations. But it's relatively few articles that end up going beyond that 30 days. And in fact, many are far less than that. And if it's determined that the content of the article and the, how it's featuring information is not going to be a good fit for the special topic section or with the journal, then the action editors will provide that feedback quite rapidly, typically within a week's time period. We're able to provide that sort of information. So broadly, if it does go through the peer review, external peer review process, you can anticipate less than 30 days. If it is not suitable and we identify that on the front end, then that would typically, you'd receive that decision within a week. So we hope that information is helpful for those of you who are considering submitting your articles for this special topic section or in general to school psychology review. Excellent. Okay, and folks can post questions in the chat or in the question and answers. Let's see. So the question that's in there right now is this issue appropriate for child-centered lit reviews dealing in how young folks of different ages, ethnicities, genders, and socioeconomic backgrounds reason about instances of social inclusion or exclusion? So Rose is thinking of moral development research done in the social domain theory tradition that doesn't have an explicit school psychology bent, but that she believes that all school psychologists should definitely know about. What do our colleagues think, Dr. Arora, Dr. Song, Dr. Sullivan? Any reflections on that one?
I would definitely encourage Rose to submit something like that. I think that's the kind of thing that we're considering, that we'd be open to considering for this special issue. I really like, drawing on what Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Song both shared about thinking about different theories from, things that we might not be highlighting as much in our particular field, and drawing that to areas that are relevant for school psychologists, we all think is key. We are also, as was noted, open to systematic literature reviews. So that's also something that we would be willing to review in this, for this particular journal, for this particular special topic, excuse me.
Yeah, and I would say in general that has been one of our emphasis, has been to feature interdisciplinary scholarship and ideas and theory that can help advance our collective knowledge, as outlined by Dr. Arora, Dr. Sullivan earlier, featured by Dr. Song, that indeed there is great interest to feature school psychology review content that exceeds the bounds of traditional historical school psychology, such that we can benefit and learn from others and incorporate this important knowledge into our research, our practice, our scholarship and our preparation within school psychology. Yeah. Excellent. Another comment that's posted in there was that over the past year, there have been a number of teachers that have been ostracized and or fired for being openly anti-racist and supporting BLM. Are there any additional structural supports to legally protect educators and overall school faculty that are aligned with the previous mentioned ideologies? Do any of our panelists have experience or perspective to offer related to this question?
So I think that's another one of those important topics that we would certainly welcome any kind of submissions, be they empirical or conceptual or otherwise, that would help us to grapple with this issue in school psychology.
Absolutely. Just to build on that, I mean, without having to answer directly to that question, thinking about making the tie explicitly to how that's what school psychologists need to be aware of as they're working with educators, as they're working to further issues related to anti-racism or social justice within their schools or school practice would be key in terms of making it relevant for the journal itself.
Yeah, I would add, in general, this was related to the previous question and the one just now, but areas that are new, and this is similar to what Dr. Arora just mentioned, but it would be important to connect all the dots for the school psychology field, because if there are new concepts and things, you might have to just make a little bit more connections into, so that people can understand who are unfamiliar with that literature base.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, and other questions or comments or ideas that any of our participants and or panelists would like to pose or add?
Well, just in response to John's comment in the chat, again, we welcome scholarship leveraging any methods. We really do want to be really explicit about the fact that we value qualitative research, mixed methods, and so we don't want authors to be limited by virtue of the type of work they're doing. If it relates to the broad topic of the special topic, we welcome all of it.
Yes, and as Dr. Arora was sharing earlier, as related to what was just stated, is that there's been a lot of colleagues who have published in other journals in other fields and other disciplines, and we really aim to bring that scholarship both back into school psych and featuring it in school psych review, and helping our colleagues in our field, our students, our faculty, all involved, our allied professionals who are engaged in reading the journal and helping work alongside us within the schools collaboratively, that we want to bring this scholarship and feature this content within school psych review such that we can continue to advance the field as related to these important topics. So I appreciate what John's indicating there and what others have been articulating, and just wanted to reiterate that this is part of our present initiative, is to help forward advance the field, and part of that is by including this type of scholarship that might not have otherwise been featured in school psych journals previously. Yeah. Okay, let's see if anyone else has any other questions or queries and or statements they wanted to offer. I noticed that we had about 30% students participating today, and certainly that's critically important, both in terms of the innovative scholarship that they're engaged in during their graduate studies, during their graduate work, as well as their ongoing interpretation and then application of the research to the field. And some of those students might go on to be practitioners and professionals working in schools with children. Some of those students might go on to be faculty preparing the next generation of school psychologists. And the type of information that's going to be featured in this special topic section should really be fundamental to the next generation of students and faculty and all of us fully understanding knowledge regarding the theory and the methods and practice that's truly going to advance equity and social justice in school psychology. So I just want to give a shout out, acknowledge those students who are participating today, and also noting that when we look at the demographic characteristics of the students in school psychology, there's great hope for the future in terms of the much higher levels of diversity within the school psychology student population, for instance, relative to the general population of school psychologists historically. So good to see you folks here as well, and great to have you considering preparing papers to submit to school psychology review along in collaboration with your faculty and such. Okay. All right, well, I was just looking over to see if there were any other items that emerged in the chat or any others that emerged in the question and answers. Not seeing any presently. Let me open it up to our panelists for one more opportunity. If there was any other things that they had thought of today that they wanted to highlight or feature for individuals who would be participating today and or watching the video on the School Psychology YouTube channel. I'll open it up. Anybody, any of the panelists want to share any other perspective or insights?
Sure. I'll just quickly say that, I think I really appreciate some of the questions we're getting about, the areas that we're looking at. I think one of the goals we had for this particular special topic was not to, which is totally great, but not here to think about a specific outcome that we were interested in or a specific population. We really are wanting to keep this broad. Our goal here is to think about including broadening our research, broadening our field, to think about different theories, different methods, different practices that we can engage in when we're collectively looking at increasing or advancing equity in our field. So taking broadly from other fields, thinking in ways that can grow our particular research, whether it's regards to theories, again, methodology, recruitment practices, whatever it is. But again, with that overall goal is what we're going for. So I encourage everybody to think broadly. I encourage everybody to think interdisciplinarily and to think about what we can bring to school psychology to help invigorate our research to better serve the population that we're working with. Thank you.
Yeah, and I thought that was such a great reminder. So I wanted to give one illustration of that. Given the questions that have been asked. So if there's a way that, if there's an intervention or an approach or strategy that has been, that's very popular in school psychology currently, then looking at that in a different lens, with a different lens, would be interesting. Or if there's certain issues with that approach, and then trying to figure out a solution for those issues with a different perspective, right? So what is that theoretical approach or strategy missing in terms of being more relevant to minoritized communities would be one way to think of that. So.
Excellent.
To the extent anybody has some expansive or foundational scholarship that they are working on or would work on to provide some more of that like broad grounding kind of literature around how does school psychology actually do that work, we would welcome that as well. So again, we're really thinking in a very comprehensive way here. So we welcome any type of submission within the purview that's been laid out in the call.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you for each of those comments from each of the panelists there. I did notice one additional question that popped up, so we'll go ahead and answer it just real quick. That the question is, should written papers be blinded manuscripts where we should exclude specific names or affiliations in writing? And the short answer to that is yes. The portal will have you submit the information about the author's affiliation and names within the portal, but within the paper itself, we have been using a policy and process where individuals are blinding those in a way that doesn't permit or tries to reduce the likelihood of identifying the particular author or author group. Now, understandably, that some instances, obviously, with the nature of the work and the extent of the work that some individuals have done, there may be a sense of who that author group might be. But in general, we've attempted and been successful to date with minimizing those types of self-identifying information within the paper. Dr. Sullivan, did you have more on that one or a different one?
I would suspect for some of this work, it's going to be challenging for people because they're likely to be citing their past work. in that, I would encourage people to include those citations, but write about them in a way that doesn't identify them as the author's work. I also would foresee that this blinding process may be challenging for some people, particularly those who are inclined to provide positionality statements within their work. And so I think if, to the extent that those can be written in a way that isn't identifying, although I know that can be really challenging in school psychology given the size of the field. And so I would encourage authors to kind of use their best judgment there. And I think it's a good practice to include those, but I also recognize that at a certain level of detail, it becomes difficult to maintain the blinding when doing so. So I would just encourage people to exercise caution.
Excellent. Thank you for that additional guidance there, Dr. Sullivan. And absolutely what we found is that including citations to your previous work is absolutely not a problem. It's just how that's framed and how it's phrased within the sentence, for instance. And there's some ways that draw attention to the individual versus there's others that are drawing attention to the content, right? And so we're hoping that to the degree that you can feature your citations in there, that's optimal. What we have discovered is that simply listing a whole bunch of blinded citations where it says author, that's usually less helpful. It increases the likelihood of identifying the individual because it's like author, versus just including those citations in there to the author or authors, but not having to necessarily personally claim them in the sense of saying, well, I wrote this and I decided that, but saying, it has been found, and also including the citation to your scholarship. So as Dr. Sullivan was describing, absolutely, we encourage you to include citations to the previous work and such. And then I like the way that Dr. Sullivan had described. I think that was one of the next questions had to do with providing positionality, reflexivity statement in a manuscript. And I think Dr. Sullivan had spoken to that one as well. So thank you. I don't know if Dr. Song or Dr. Arora, I think Dr. Sullivan might have more to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just think, like I said, use your best judgment. Ask yourself whether, given that information, somebody would be able to identify you. I also think, frankly, there's a space to get more specific in those statements after articles are accepted, because by that point, the blinding is not necessary in the way that it is now. So again, I think it can be really valuable to include those. And I think it's a great practice for school psychology authors to get into. But I would just encourage people to consider, like, given all the information provided, could reviewers reasonably know who you are? And if that's the case, I would kind of scale it back a little bit. Or if in multi-author papers, I think to the extent that the statements are framed in summative statements, rather than including like the description of each author sequentially, if there were more integrative statements about the different characteristics and experience of the authors, that can be helpful, because then it's not, well, I know who the first author is and the second author and so on, if that makes sense.
Excellent. That's very helpful. And it also brings up another potential topic that we'll have to potentially feature a future school SPR Zoom webinar on, in terms of, and also consider our infrastructure for where's the space and how do we include this information in a way that it facilitates the process of peer review, but also ultimately facilitates the integrity of the publication and such. So I think great question, and really brought up a lot of great considerations. I agree with what Dr. Sullivan was stating in terms of great guidance. And then we'll continue to reflect on this and put additional efforts into it to determine if there's things that we could do within our peer review process, our portal and such, to help further facilitate this. Yeah, great. Just looking over to see if there are any other chat or Q&A questions, not seeing any. Okay. Well, if there's no other comments from our panelists, I guess I should pause for 5 seconds to see if there's anything else that comes out. Give it that space. Okay. Well then, on behalf of all of the participants here, I want to give a great big round of applause to our panelists today. And thank you, Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Arora, Dr. Song, for joining us, as well as for putting in the tremendous leadership efforts to facilitate this special topic section, And of course, the real work, bigger, even greater work once upon the manuscripts being submitted and managing those and curating through the process to prepare a tremendously informative set of articles that will further inform our understanding of theory and methods and practice to advance equity and social justice in school psychology. So thank you very much. And hopefully each of you will have an opportunity to check in with our colleagues. If you have more questions that come up afterwards, feel free to email them. Their emails are widely available online, as it turns out. And so thank you for participating today. Thank you for considering School Psychology Review as an outlet for your scholarship. And thank you to each of our panelists for your ongoing leadership and contributions to the field of school psychology, as well as School Psychology Review. So thank you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.